Hi,
Hi,
how you doing?
I am good. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. I have no real exciting news this week. What about you? Do you have anything fun?
No, not necessarily, aside from Bowie turned 8 yesterday.
Happy birthday, Bowie, to listeners slash watchers. That is Megan's cat. That's not like the reincarnation of David Bowie.
But yeah, no, other than that, things are very mellow. Not much going on. It's the holidays, the summer holidays.
August is weird. Strange, breathless pause of a month.
Yeah, it's as an adult thinking back to when you're a child and you're really trying to suck all the time and enjoy every last inkling of the summer holiday in August because we always went back the Thursday after Labor Day in America, so like September 4th to 8th perhaps. And here I know it's a bit different. In high school, we went back mid August, but for the first 8 years of education, so kindergarten or reception through till year 8, yeah, we had a nice long summer, like mid June till the beginning of September.
That's lovely.
And then as an adult, you're kind of like children are everywhere because it's their holidays and they're loud until quite late at night, as it
Yes.
was here. But I can't begrudge them because we've all been there.
Yeah.
I'm just a curmudgeon now.
That is kind of how you realize when the kind of breathless excitement of summer turns into like just the weighted drudgery of God, I gotta navigate the fact that I can't just do things without thinking about will there be children there at all times? Like, will it be noisy? Will it be crowded? Will the traffic be bad? Or whatever.
Yeah, on Saturday, I had to go into downtown Manchester for some volunteer training, and there was this little girl. She was very cute. She was maybe 2, and she was at the age where she wants to push every single button and pull every single lever that she sees. And we were at the tram stop waiting, and her dad, like, there was another at least child, maybe 2. So the dad was distracted, and she went up to the like emergency yellow box and she was reaching out to push it and her dad went no 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 no, and it was just this very funny moment of children. You have to watch them all the time, but because she wasn't my child, I mean, I thought it was very funny and I was too far away to try to interfere and be like no no.
There are times where you just have to witness these things and reflect on one's own choices and laugh and mock.
Yes, but going into downtown for those like 2 hours because it was a beautiful day out, I was like, I can't wait to be home with the cats and just do my embroidery and binge watch House. It's like I'm not going outside because everyone, their mother, their grandmother, their great grandmother, their second cousins are going to be out, and I don't want it. No. So,
The reason why we became researchers so that we could stay inside with the
yeah.
books and the thoughts.
Anywho, today, dear watchers and listeners, we are doing nightmares and out of mind, out of sight. I guarantee you I will get out of mind, out of sight backwards
Yeah.
because it's the inversion of the saying out of sight, out of mind. But before that, we have to do our usual mug reveal.
Mug reveal!
Alex, you go first.
Okay, I still have some black coffee worship left, so I am still on the espresso, but today I'm drinking from my teeny tiny black and gold Art Deco espresso cup. So
It's so shiny.
it's so shiny. Like, to the people who can't see, it is like deeply reflective. To be honest, I bought this one because I saw Damien Hirst's The Fly espresso cups. I don't know if you saw his exhibition where he does these pinned butterflies in this kind of stained glass window configuration. That's the word. And he released alongside it espresso cups so that there are butterflies on the espresso cup, but they reflect in the incredibly shiny saucer, and you see them properly in their reflection, whereas they're distorted on the cup. And I loved that so much. Can I afford Damien Hirst? I cannot. Can I afford a shiny little Art Deco espresso cup from a charity shop? Yes, I can.
I don't think I've seen those of Damien Hirst, but I do know a lot of his other work. He's quite fun and provocative.
And what about you? What have you got today?
Today, so I'm still cat sitting, so I'm still trying to plunder their, cupboard for things. And I thought today's was quite nice. So it is a print of a Manchester women's suffrage demonstration poster from 1908. So I will show it to the screen briefly, dear listeners, for those who are viewing. And the other side, if everyone sees it, it just says Alexandra Park on it. And that was exciting because I used to live across the street from Alexandra Park here in Manchester. And I'm assuming that this was purchased at one of the old hunters' lodges that's been converted into a little history museum space for the history of Whalley Range and Moss Side, so those portions of Manchester. So I thought that was really nice.
That is, I love that. And for people who are listening rather than watching, the image on the poster has a kind of Broomhilda-styled woman. She's got like the winged helmet and she's blowing a trumpet.
Yeah, it says mass meeting and procession, and there's a kind of dark red sun, a day dawning in the background, and she is standing on some sort of it's not a balustrade. What is it on the top of a castle where you can look down?
Like a parapet.
Sure.
Like a crenellated parapet kind of business.
So
we've still got a bit of medievalism even in that mug, because obviously Broomhilda is inspired by Wagner's The Ring, which is inspired by a medieval narrative poem. It gets translated a lot. I focus on William Morris's translation now and again, so I get a little bit hazy about the word. But it's nice that we bring in the medieval, even as we're drinking our coffee. And are you drinking coffee today, Meaghan?
Yes, I am still drinking. I have actually a good portion of my black coffee worship left, as I didn't drink coffee for a few days because of running around, and so I was getting coffee out and about. Still delicious as always.
Yes.
And we will share our absolutely wonderful discount code with them at the end of this episode. So please keep listening.
We will, absolutely. I, however, have plowed through my black coffee worship. I have downed it like it was going out of style. So I'm very grateful for that.
Yes, thank you so much. So today, Nightmares and Out of Mind, Out of Sight, I'm going to do our usual, written, directed by, and then we'll do our summaries. And I also will provide a small disclaimer for today as well.
Yes.
So Nightmares, it appears that both episodes actually the story was by Joss Whedon, but then there's a teleplay that was modified by other members of staff. So Nightmares, the teleplay, was by David Greenwalt, a name we're going to become very familiar with. And it was directed by Bruce Seth Green. Had him a few times already. We love Bruce Seth Green.
Not to be confused with the soon-to-arrive Seth Green, the actor.
And then Out of Mind, Out of Sight, again, the story by Joss Whedon, but the teleplay by Ashley Gable and Thomas A. Swiden, who are names that we had last week for, I think it was iRobot. I could be wrong. It was one of those, though. And that Out of Mind was directed by Reza Badihi. And before we do the summaries, just a quick trigger warning and disclosure. Both episodes deal with really intense topics. Nightmares orbits around a young boy who's put in a coma because he is severely beaten by his little junior league baseball coach. So that's, domestic violence and harm and abuse. And then we have Out of Mind, where our big bad, I guess you could say, her name is Marcy. She becomes invisible, and Alex will share more on that, because people ignore her to the point where she has a little nest at the school. So her parents aren't missing her. So we've also got parental abuse and neglect in that form, as well as severe bodily harm and attempted murder in Out of Mind. So just sharing those up front. These episodes, we won't dwell on the heavy, but there is heavy content that we cannot ignore. Anything to add, Alex?
I think it's just worth acknowledging that Buffy was trying to do such a lot for the era. So we've joked in the past about the after-school special episodes, and here's what happens when one of your friends joins another friend's group and becomes mean, but it's done through the metaphor of hyena possession, and it's quite whimsical and fun. But these ones, especially Nightmares, really are thinking a bit more deeply about real-world issues and the pain that they can create in young people. And also calling that to the attention of teenagers who, I feel like with Nightmares, there's a certain edge of look out for this kind of thing. It might not happen to you, but it might be happening around you.
Yes.
So it's just, I really appreciate that Buffy wasn't shying away from the complicated topics. But again, just to reiterate what Meaghan said, we won't be delving into deep psychological trauma narratives. We'll be addressing them, but lightly, and we'll be talking about the medieval and the Gothic side of things more. But it's important, listeners and watchers, that you protect your mental health. So we understand if you need to maybe bow out of this episode if those are difficult topics for you.
Yes. And we'll also include some links in our show notes for further information just regarding real life hotlines and reaching out for yourself or for others that you care or concerned about. So now we're done with the heavy, hopefully. Yep. And so we're both going to do quick summaries. So I'll do nightmares first. So as I mentioned, the whole episode revolves around this young boy. His name is Billy, who is in a coma in the hospital and has been for about a week or so. And it turns out that because Sunnydale is located on a Hellmouth, Billy in his coma starts to astral project to the point where he's actually manifesting a nightmare realm into the real world. So at one point, Giles says, in a few hours, reality will fold completely into the realm of nightmares. So the whole episode is about fears manifesting, facing or not facing your fears, and trying to also just figure out what's going on, how this is possible. So we'll get much more into detail and everything, but basically this episode is about a boy in a coma who, because he's on the Hellmouth, is able to bring the nightmare realm into the Sunnydale reality.
Yeah, and it's not necessarily like monsters come spewing through like a Stranger Things type thing. It is like anxiety dreams become reality, so students will suddenly find themselves naked in front of the classroom. So there's a little bit of whimsy to it too, whilst it's also dealing with that stuff deeper. But yeah, it's like anxiety dreams and nightmares become their reality.
Yes. So, Alex, what is Out of Mind, Out of Sight about?
Well, as you mentioned, it is about Marcy, who is so fundamentally ignored that it affects her reality and she becomes invisible. You don't really know that as the episode begins. All you know is that students keep getting assaulted by some sort of invisible presence or force, which then writes messages on the walls around them like, look, listen, and other such things. The Scooby Gang figure out that they are clustering around Cordelia, these assaults. Then they figure out that it's clustering around Cordelia because of Marcy's jealousy or antagonism towards Cordelia. And they have to kind of figure out this is a human being who something seemingly impossible has happened to. How does the Slayer punish a human being? Demons are easy. You stab them. Humans? Not so simple. There's a showdown right before a May Queen. Is it a May Queen?
May Queen, yes.
We don't have these things in the UK, so it was always like dreamy America where you get to dress up and be a princess or a queen.
We don't, I didn't in high school have a May Queen. I think that's very much a fabrication.
Okay.
For this episode. Maybe some high schools do it, but that's one that I never understood.
That's a Buffyism. Okay. So Cordelia wins May Queen. There's a subplot of Buffy feeling lonely and isolated as well, which chimes with Marcy's plot. Anyway, Buffy punches Marcy. Marcy collapses. Then the FBI arrive and take Marcy away, so we don't have to worry about how does a Slayer punish a human, because the FBI are going to train Marcy in espionage. And she joins a classroom full of empty chairs, which we are to assume are full of invisible teenagers. And when she opens her textbook, it's like, oh, what is it? It's like infiltration, case study, cult leader. And she goes, cool. And so there's this kind of X-Files-y ending to that as well, which I have always thought was really funny.
Yeah. One thing about the book she opens, this is a trivia fact that I actually just learned this morning when I was briefing up on the trivia around the episodes, is if you pause what is said on the page, like below the header, it turns into paraphrases of Happiness is a Warm Gun by the Beatles.
What?
Yeah. So there's a part that says like a lizard on a window pane on it and everything, which is, so again, like the future episode where we get the Irish bus routes in.
Yeah, they just magpie anything for this show. It's like, we need to fill something with something. What have you got in your pockets?
It's just, I mean, it fits. Happiness is the gun aspect, but also doesn't fit. And then just the X-Files thing briefly. I wish that they could have tongue-in-cheeked it a bit more and had like a pseudo Scully Mulder come in. I bet there's probably copyright and issues with that. But I thought that it would have fit so perfectly.
Yeah.
I want that, fan fiction, real world collision of the two series because they were airing at the same time. But alas, we don't. But let's go back to Nightmares. Great summary, Alex.
Thank you.
So just briefly, I mean, the opening sequence of Nightmares is really important. And then there's another scene quite shortly after with the Master talking to Colin, the anointed one.
The Anointed.
And both scenes are really important, not just to the episode, but to the series, because next episode for us, dear listeners, is the finale of season 1. So it's really amping things up. And so the first scene starts with the silhouette of Buffy walking down the sewer tunnel that leads into the underground church full of candles. But the silhouette is of her holding a stake. And so it's not only foreshadowing, quite literally, an iconic shot we'll get in the next episode, but it also evokes Nosferatu and the famous kind of like hand on the wall, this something is occurring. And Buffy goes down into the underground chapel and encounters the Master, but he overcomes her basically. But then it turns out to all be a dream.
Yeah, it does have that kind of typical anxiety dream thing of where she raises the stake and then it just falls out of her hand, like her hand is too weak to hold it.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel that like viscerally because my anxiety dreams, like if I have an I'm being attacked anxiety dream, mine is that I always go to punch them and my hand loses all power at the last minute and just kind of flops against them. So when I see her drop that stake, I'm like, yes, I've dreamt that too.
Sorry, I'm not laughing at your anxiety dream.
Oh no, it's fair.
But so it's presenting the anxiety of Buffy encountering the Master, right? The big bad of the entire season. This, as Giles says in Out of Mind, Vampire King, this great vampiric entity. But also it's setting up the idea of anxiety dreams and nightmares for the episode itself. So it's twofold, and that's worth acknowledging. And then I'm going to jump to just the second one because, again, I think that it really leaning into the gothic and everything, but it also begs some questions about vampires and how they function and the series and also what fear is. So the Master is sermonizing to Colin. And again, Mark Metcalf, fantastic. He's finally learned how to talk in his vamp teeth. And I'll say it now, Buffy, later in the episode, she talks very well in her vampire teeth. We don't have the lisping struggling like we had with Darla or we've had with other vampires in the series. So I think they're figuring out how to use those prosthetics.
I always just assumed that they overdubbed afterwards.
No.
Really? Ooh.
Not that I'm aware of. And as the series continues, I know that they start to figure out the vamp face makeup and the teeth, because I believe it was David Boreanaz that said that at first it was like impossible to talk and move your face. And I mean, we'll see a quite a significant jump in quality of prosthetics and kind of the makeup in future seasons. Because right now they're just scraping by. They're just trying to make something. But so we have the Master sermonizing in a church, as you do, in the basement of above or near the Hellmouth. And I'm going to read the quote that he says, and then we will discuss. It's a little long. I apologize. But I think it's very important also just for the series as a whole. So, fear is a wonderful thing. It is the most powerful force in the human world. Not love, not hate, fear. And then he asks Colin, what did you fear when you were human? And Colin says, monsters. And they both have a laugh. Back to the sermon. We are defined by the things we fear. This symbol, and at this point the Master is walking up to a crucifix that's still standing down in the church.
Yep, sure. Anyway. Why not? Yeah, I'd leave, like, if it was something that caused me great pain in my house, I'd leave that up, for sure.
I also don't think we've seen it in any of the other shots.
No. So, in the middle of the floor as well, like, there is no subtlety here. It's not like it's rubble.
And it's huge. It's taller than the Master. So, I mean, divine manifestation? I don't know.
No, right.
I don't know. But so we have the Master walking up, and he said, this symbol, these two planks of wood, it confounds me, suffuses me with mortal dread, but fear is in the mind. And then he reaches out to the cross and starts to touch it. Like pain, it can be controlled. If I can face my fear, it cannot master me. And then he moves his hand away, and they have another kind of like little chat. But Alex, what is happening here?
This up?
Oh, sorry. I am trying to not just continue talking.
I love it so much. It's like, there you go. You sort it out. Okay, I'll catch this ball. I mean, what struck me about this that made me, as a teenager, as a kid watching this, I keep forgetting that it spanned like my childhood into my teens is how it worked out. So I was watching this as a kid, and I just took it as evidence of the Master's toughness, that he's able to control. Like, it's almost like they're saying, if you can grab a red hot poker and just focus hard enough, you can force it to not harm you properly. Because he does sizzle a bit when he grabs the cross.
Yes.
But then when he removes his hand, it's only a very small amount of smoke. Whereas we've seen throughout the season, like when Luke gets confronted with the angel cross that spills out of Buffy's pocket, he properly panics, and that's a very small cross. So I kind of took it as indicative of the Master's power. But I feel like it raises a lot of questions about the theology of the Buffy universe. Is he able to outthink God's effect on him? Are vampires only affected by religious iconography because they fear it? Do they therefore have to have had a religious background for it to affect them? Like, I have so many questions just because they have this throwaway line of how tough the Master is, how supernaturally powerful. And I'm like, it's not that it doesn't make sense. It's not that it makes no sense. It's just that they haven't thought through the sense that it makes.
No, exactly. Because, I mean, there are lots of kind of comments as the series progresses of what about Jewish vampires? What about Buddhist or atheistic vampires? And so, yeah, I mean, as you said, this is quite a dramatic yet throwaway scene because the Master, despite saying that it inspires mortal fear in him, right? So that it's something that's existential dread, even though he says it's just 2 planks of wood, and I am aware of that, he still sizzles. He still has some sort of metaphysical, spiritual, physical response to that symbol. So it is, in some sense, giving the symbol theological or divine power, if that's how you want to phrase it. But it's also negating that at the same time. So it's this paradoxical, strange contradiction of itself.
Yeah, because it kind of aligns faith and fear as if they are both just feelings that you can control in a mind over matter kind of way.
Exactly.
And I love it as a visual because it's really I love the way it's shot because it's shot from above the Master's headline, from behind the cross, down onto him, so that he then reaches up to grab the cross and you can see the anointed kid kind of behind him in the church and all. Great shot. And I know exactly why they included it. I feel like it's a little pat that the Master's sermon aligns so perfectly with the themes of the episode, because why would the Master care? Wherever he is, why would he be chatting to the anointed one about fear? It's like, okay, fine, synchronicity. But yeah, it's just...
And it's also the commentary in this scene, it doesn't directly correlate, but especially the visual language that you just discussed. In the final season, there is a moment that heavily evokes this scene visually, and it kind of questions of theology, spirituality, divinity, mind over matter in a way. And also, as you were talking, I've probably had this thought fleetingly at some point throughout my PhD, but when Angel's chest is scarred by Buffy's cross in the Scully box moment a few episodes back, because, again, crosswatch, nil. We have the earrings for a bit in Nightmares. Other than that, I didn't notice any. You can correct me.
We had the chunky cross in the dream.
In the beginning. The very first opening shot. Okay.
First opening, she's wearing the big cross when she goes to face the Master in her anxiety dream.
Perfect. I did not clock that. So, 1, Angel clunky cross, first scene. Again, kind of signifying her fear because then she wears none throughout the rest of the eps. These 2 episodes. Angel has a soul. He's a human soul. So physically, why does the cross still burn him in the way that it burns or impacts a vampire?
I mean, maybe this is one that we can talk about a little bit more deeply when we get into our out of mind discussion.
Okay. Yeah. So it's something I think to think about. And again, these are questions that they clearly didn't think through fully, but that's not the fault of them because I don't think they were anticipating like medievalists to come and be like, actually,
let's talk about the theological ramifications to the wider universe you're creating. We're just supposed to be teenagers going, punch it, Buffy!
Yeah.
But also, as well, to give them their credit, they're kind of wrestling with traditional vampire lore as it has been inherited by the show, which is from Dracula to this point, that's like 100 years of lore and development and cultural shifting. The vampire had become kind of crystallized in cultural consciousness. Everyone knows the rules of the vampire, ignoring the fact that vampire rules aren't universal across all texts. So Buffy was kind of taking this established law and then trying to think about what they were doing differently with it. And so it does create these moments of tension or contradiction where what they want their vampires to do doesn't work within the classic vampire tradition that they have to at least agree to abide by to begin with so that viewers feel like they know what's going on, and then they can begin to develop it as it goes. So they didn't know what they were going to be doing long term, I don't think. So yeah, I can forgive them. It's a very complicated place to be in, but it really does lead to these moments of, but why? Why does he have a cross in his living room, essentially?
I mean, that one's inexplicable, whereas the entire kind of angel questions, I think, but it's asking these ontological and epistemological. So these questions about being and the nature of the universe and the nature of the world, kind of questions in exciting ways.
So for our listeners who aren't familiar, please define ontological and epistemological. That might be useful terms.
Oh, I thought I just kind of did by reneging back. And so ontology is the way of being in the world. It's so humans, plants, animals, it's the way that we categorize states of being. These are very, very basic terms. I mean, there's whole fields of philosophical thought around these. And then epistemology is the way that we know and categorize the world. So thinking about your high school science courses, right? And how you have species and genus and how humans like to put things in boxes. So when we have a vampire, for example, that is a walking paradox, especially in Buffy, and especially a figure like Angel that is an ensouled vampire, because he defies these categories and these ways of being that are understood or assumed to be stable. So that's kind of what those terms mean. And so when I say Buffy's asking these kind of questions, it's asking them within its own world, but also challenging us to think about what we take at face value or what we assume to be true, and perhaps why that is. Is that better, Alex?
Yes, it's that honestly, that I was so happy just listening to you explain it. It was one of those moments where I could hear expertise glossing over fabulous points because you're like, I know this, everyone knows this, it's fine. I'm like, no, dig in.
I apologize, everybody. I'm so used to putting those words into my thesis, and I was always like, can't believe I'm using these words. But then
to confess to the listeners, readers, and my esteemed colleague, I literally had post-it notes on my desk for the entirety of my thesis with the definition of ontology on one and epistemology on the other, because they come up a lot in medievalism and Gothic.
Same at whiteboard. And soteriology, which is the study of the end of times and how the judgment day and everything, because they're all so interlinked in medieval theology and medieval studies, and I would confuse them all the time as well. So anywho, philosophy session over, hopefully. But so we have these great moments, but kind of getting back to the episode, Alex, and trying to think, I guess, medievally again. Is there anything else that's like medieval that stands out to you in Nightmares?
Yes. So, and again, this isn't necessarily me saying that they had a full awareness of these texts, but the way in which they present the dreamer, the little boy, what he's gone through, how he's kind of synthesizing his experience through this coma sleep and therefore projecting this dream world out. It aligns in really interesting ways to medieval literature dream vision narratives. So dream visions, for those who are unaware, it's a story where you have a protagonist who's awake to begin with. They're wrestling with some issue, some pain, some question. They fall asleep, sometimes involuntarily, sometimes just they go to bed. And then they enter this secondary space, which is the dream space. And they have some kind of interaction there that helps them come to terms with whatever they're wrestling with in their waking world. And then when they wake up, they begin to put things into a different context.
Yes.
So
just a quick to add to that before you continue. So also sometimes the figure dies, at least metaphorically. Usually it's about 3 days. So you also have vision literature or dream literature. They're the same thing where it's the person who has died and they enter into this second space, this liminal space, and they're shown what purgatory and hell is. Dante's Divine Comedy does fall into the category of vision literature, but then there's also a whole other genre or flavor of the genre that is about these other spaces.
Yes.
So, Alex, take it away again.
So the two texts that I was thinking of in particular in relation to nightmares was Pearl, which is written by the Pearl poet, who is the same poet as probably wrote Sir Gawain and the Green Knight. And then there's Chaucer's The Book of the Duchess. So in the Pearl poem, it's this really beautiful meditation on grief. So you have this man talking about how he lost his pearl in the garden. He dropped it. It's gotten lost amongst all the soil and the earth. And the garden's beautiful. He talks about how it's fragranced and how beautiful the flowers are. And then as that part of the poem progresses, you realize he's not talking about a jewel. The jewel is a metaphor for his 2-year-old daughter who died. And the pearl getting lost in the garden is a metaphor for her burial and how she's been enclosed by the earth because she's been buried. And he becomes so overcome by grief in the garden, that's the real awake moment, that he falls into a swoon. And in the swoon has a dream. And he's in paradise space, or he's adjacent to paradise in the dream. Everything's jeweled. He walks on top of pearls without crushing them. It's beautiful. There is a river, and on the opposite side of the river, he can view paradise and a young woman. And the young woman kind of is like a philosophical coach for him. She talks to him about grief, about religion, about how faith should overcome grief, that the pearl has gone to a better place, it should be okay. And as he's talking, he comes to the realization that that is also his daughter. So the woman in white is both a jewel and a pearl and a 2-year-old girl and a ghost and an angel and all of these things kind of at once in the way that things can be in dreams. And so this grieving father comes to terms to a certain degree insofar as he can. What's really lovely about Pearl is it doesn't suddenly wash away his grief. It just makes it more bearable for him so that when he wakes up, he's kind of got a plan of action for how to live his life in a virtuous way so that he too can go to heaven and be reunited with his daughter. And of course, that's teaching us, the readers, those same lessons. So as we're reading Pearl, I think it obliquely is addressing that crisis of faith that can happen in the face of bereavement. How can this happen? What God does this or whatever? And so medieval readers of the text who may have had that crisis of faith as a result of, child loss, quite common in that era.
Incredibly common. They would have 10 plus children in their life, and maybe 2 would make it to adulthood, maybe 5 past the age of 10. Child fatality was exceptionally more common, but that doesn't mean that it was not grief-inducing and hard and horrible. Sometimes people go, oh, well, they were used to it.
Yeah, like
absolutely not the case. So I just wanted to make sure that we also, so this story, the reason that it's a 2-year-old daughter is because she's gone past that phase of high infant mortality postpartum, but then it is becoming a small entity. 2-year-olds, that's when they start getting personality. That's when they start
chatting and saying things back wrong in adorable ways.
Yeah, so that's like, I'm not saying it's easier than losing a baby, but it's a much more, how do I phrase this, Alex? You have more of an actual kind of human relationship rather than a biological, primal, basic bond.
There's that kind of affection of baby of I will love you, I will care for you, I will cherish you. And then baby starts talking back and it can become that kind of interpersonal relationship as well as having all that love and affection. Exactly. And additionally, keeping her about the age of 2 also emphasizes the innocence aspect. Mm-hmm. She doesn't have time to have become really naughty. You can't have any questions about what is child sin possible. She's just a little sweet baby. Yes. And so, readers of Pearl would have been, because it's also worth keeping in mind class situations. So readers would have had to be upper class. They too would be having as many children as possible. And while they probably would have lost fewer children than, say, the people who then had to take the kids out into the fields and work because they had, living, that's agriculture. We'll talk about that another time.
Love it.
They still would have been having a lot of children. They still would have been losing a lot of children. And they still would have been perhaps addressing their priests with questions of, how do I continue to have faith? in the face of such loss. And Pearl, by reading it, gives them those kind of guidelines. And so what I thought interesting about Nightmares is that it follows that kind of schema as well. And it does it through Xander.
Yes. Xander in this episode is very much a vehicle for a lot of different kind of metaphors and analogies. He's got the Hansel and Gretel scene where he's chasing the candy bars and shoving his face. He has, the infamous, he's the one that's naked in the classroom, he's in his boxers, he's in his underwear, he's not completely naked.
The first shot is him from like the waist up and he's nude and he does that cover up kind of thing like this.
Yeah.
And then it pans back and you see he's in boxer shorts, which are loose fitting cotton. So they're just shorts. There's nothing too revealing there, but the gist has gotten across.
Because it's, this is family hour kind of television after school special. So this is an HBO.
Keep it classy.
Yeah. But then he also manifests these other things of like acceptance and confrontation, which I'm assuming you're going to get to, Alex.
Exactly. So Xander's fear is of this clown that came to his 6th birthday. And he bumps into Willow in the episode. She's just escaped singing on stage a song she doesn't know, hasn't prepared for, isn't talented enough to sing. Those classics.
From Madame Butterfly.
From Madame Butterfly.
Of all operas.
Yeah. So we do need to nod a little bit to cultural appropriation and colonialization in the representation of Madame Butterfly, but that's a little bit far away from where we need to be. Yeah. Let's just nod to that and move on. It was the 90s. Terrible time if you weren't white.
Yeah.
So Xander and Willow unite, both a little bit traumatized from being forced to experience these anxiety dreams. And Xander says, "Do you remember my 6th birthday?" And she goes, "Haha, yeah, when the clown came and you nearly were." And you see her go, "Oh no." And then the clown comes up from behind them and chases them and they run for a bit. And then eventually Xander turns around, clocks the clown, knocks him out, knocks him down, and then says, "You stupid. You bit was stupid. You made bad balloon animals. I didn't like you this." And he really dresses him down. And that kind of frees Xander from the nightmare. He can suddenly have more agency over his reactions. And I love that aligns with like Freudian analysis of dreams and what dreams do. But Freudian analysis inadvertently mirrors what dream visions can achieve as well. Yeah. So I just love that really, like, those two align in a really entertaining, fascinating way.
And I think also that scene's really important because they also run into Giles. And Giles has been unable, he gets lost in the stacks, and then it comes to be revealed that he can't read. Poor Giles can't read, and that's his life, quite literally.
Like that, I feel like that is the worst nightmare of the bunch.
Yeah.
The idea
he tells Buffy, he's like, "I see the words, I read the words, but they don't make sense. They mean nothing." And talk about anxiety-inducing fear. But yeah, when Xander confronts the clown, which, talking about Freud, the way the clown is painted is it's in violation of all the ways you're supposed to paint the face of a clown because of its pointy edges and the way that it's going down to make it look aggressive, and the colors. If you look at other clowns that are quite famous, they have very rounded features, even the sad clown. So the clown is also signifying that psychology in a different kind of way. But yet Xander's becoming free, and for Willow and Giles to witness that, it kind of, I think, helps them. I mean, Willow's still in her geisha outfit because, again, Madame Butterfly, cultural appropriation. Then Giles is just being Giles. But I think that it helps all of them start to see what is occurring rather than being distracted by their own fears in sight of reality literally starting to fold in on itself.
Absolutely. And that seems to feed back to the kid as well, the little boy who's in the coma. One, because at some point in this kind of dream-ish reality, he has a conversation with Buffy where he's like, "Oh, I did a bad thing. I lost the game. It's all my fault." And Buffy goes, "What, there weren't 8 other players on the team?" And he just kind of goes, "Okay." And then the big bad monster appears and Buffy has to fight it or try to fight it, and they run away. And then not long after Xander punches the clown and the day gets saved, they end up back in the hospital room with the little boy who comes out of the coma as if he's kind of synthesized this lesson, as if by fighting these monsters in the dream, he's a little bit braver. Like the dream vision, he's got a to-do list of how to cope with what's happened to him. And when he wakes up, his coach comes in and through some clues reveals that he's been the big bad who's been chasing them in the nightmare. And it's because of abuse. And then the little boy says, this isn't fair. And he dresses down his coach like Xander dressed down the clown and echoes Buffy and says there were 8 other players on the team. Yes. And then the coach tries to run and Xander has assimilated his lesson and he grabs him. And it feels a little bit cheesy and a little bit of a silly horror handling of quite a horrifying reality.
Mm-hmm.
But it pulls everything together in quite a sophisticated way when you view it through this kind of medieval lens. And Xander gets to be heroic for once, and Buffy's a kid.
Yeah, and also it goes back to the Master's sermon, but in a positive way rather than a vampire trying to talk to his, apocalyptic anointed one, where if I can face my fear, it cannot master me. And so it's giving this narrative of if you are a victim of abuse or assault, it does not define you, and that you can overcome it by self-care and self-love and other things. So there's also this message of the entire episode that's incredibly dark in that aspect, but kind of giving a not philosophical, kind of therapeutic, I guess, ending. And obviously it's way more complicated than that. But
for an after-school special teenage primetime show, it handles it quite deftly. It gives enough for these kids to go, actually, I recognize some things about this. Maybe I need to speak to someone a little bit older than me and ask for help. It gives them a skill set.
Yeah, because Buffy is also the kind of guide for Billy, the little boy, throughout, because Billy appears a few times specifically to Buffy. But remember that the nightmare realm is encroaching or folding in on the Sunnydale reality because Billy is in the coma. So he is the protagonist, I guess you could say, of this dream or vision literature. And as Alex said, there's always a guide. Buffy becomes that guide, which is really lovely. And she's the one that Billy's trying to help her. She's trying to help him. And throughout this process, unlike a lot of other vision literature, what's kind of one-sided, and the person that is in the dream state walks away with something and the audience. With this, we get Billy, the audience, and Buffy walks away with something because she's had to confront her major fears. Because since reality is folding in on itself, things that are impossible become possible. So the Master, as he says, because you fear it, it is so. She actually encounters him in one of the graveyards and he buries her alive. And then Giles sees, her headstone and he says, "This is my greatest fear." And then we get Buffy emerging from the soil, from the earth, and she's a vampire. And that's one of her greatest fears.
I have to say, she looks fantastic with vampy face.
Yeah, not everyone looks great in vamp face, but her features, she pulls it off quite well. And quick side note, Sarah Michelle Gellar's biggest fear is being buried alive.
Oh, that's cruel.
She begged Joss Whedon to rewrite the scene and he refused. And apparently, after filming that shot, she cried in her entire car drive home. And it's not the only time we're going to see Buffy buried alive.
No.
And
it is also worth acknowledging, because we have to do this now and again. I believe in accountability culture rather than cancel culture. Joss Whedon certainly has some power issues, especially towards his female actors.
Mm-hmm.
And he would occasionally put things into plot to keep the women in line. I have no idea if that was part of the background of this situation. I don't know. But I just find it interesting that a certain degree of compassion towards a teenage actor was missing there.
A young female actress.
Yeah.
Who's the heroine, superhero of your entire show. But Buffy, she overcomes that. And I also just want to say, medievally, another component of these kind of dream vision occurring and nightmares manifesting, there's actually 2 bits. One kind of a throwaway, because it'll probably come back in later episodes, but it's tapping into the incubus and succubus lore of the Middle Ages, which were demons that fed on sleeping individuals and induced nightmares. So there's that. And then I think more interestingly is because this was possible because they're on a Hellmouth. This is one of the first times that it really overtly shows how the Hellmouth can manipulate and warp spatio temporal displacement. So space, time, linearity, it's all collapsing. I mean, as Willow and Xander say with Giles when they escape the evil clown, they see a dimensional rift in front of them. It's daytime. They emerge out of the high school, and they're standing on the front steps of Sunnydale High, and they look across the street, and Willow goes, "Excuse me, when did they put a cemetery in across the street?" And Xander goes, "And when did they make it night over there?" And it's this like kind of wormhole that is nighttime in a cemetery or graveyard, but then it's surrounded by the day and everything else. I mean, there's these giant bee ants flying about and everything, but it's showing just how powerful the dynamics and metaphysics of the Hellmouth are, and this supernatural liminal space that defies normal or rational or anticipated space and time, just like a dream vision, which they enter into that liminal space. And so I know that sounds really sciencey and techy, but it's showing the possibility of multiple realities, which kind of occurs a few more times throughout the series. And it also shows the susceptibility of the Hellmouth's influence, and that physics, as we see in Out of Mind, Out of Sight, physics are not necessarily physics in Sunnydale.
Yeah. I mean, maybe that's a good opportunity for us to segue into Out of Mind, Out of Sight and talk about what's happening there. Is there anything else in Nightmares you want to address?
No, other than when Buffy said they're talking about astral projection, and she goes, "Could I be sailing Billy's asteroid body?"
Yeah.
And it's just one of those moments of like, Buffy's smarter than that, and it was just such a throwaway, but quite funny. Hopefully that wasn't your quote, by the way. Okay, good. So I just thought that was funny, ending a very dark episode on a lighthearted matter. So now we're talking about physics and Out of Mind, Out of Sight. Alex, I think that you were gonna say something.
I didn't have anything like particularly like intense, but what I quite enjoyed, like, I suppose this one wasn't so much about the physics. We can move into that in a little bit. That was just like an overarching connection. But I thought it was really interesting how the lessons that they learn in school begin to speak directly to the supernatural issues they face on the Hellmouth. So for some reason, like in Nightmares, they talk about Shylock. Do they talk about Shylock in Nightmares? What does it talk about at the beginning?
I think that's Out of Mind, Out of Sight, where they're doing.
Yes, it is, because in Nightmares, so the classes relate to what's going on in the episodes. And in Nightmares, they're talking about the importance of active listening. And I feel like that in identifying someone who is being abused, active listening is a crucial tool in looking after the other people around you. Like if someone comes to you and says, "I need help," not to brush them off, but to actively listen. I think they do this as well in the episode.
Xander does it to the teacher he has a crush on, even though he didn't do the homework.
And then, yeah, in Out of Sight, Out of Mind, you have this discussion on Shylock from The Merchant of Venice. If you prick me, do we not bleed kind of conversation, which Cordelia engages with in really interesting ways. But that invokes concepts of compassion and empathy, which of course have been completely lacking for poor Marcy, who has subsequently disappeared because no one has had that kind of compassionate way of thinking about her. And then it goes from metaphysics to physics, and Giles does a little bit there, which I thought was really interesting.
Giles has this great kind of, oh my gosh, like jump, oh, you ding dong moment where he goes, "We've been thinking about this in regards to the spiritual and, you know, the occult." He was referring to a book of Vishnu. So it's a fictional book. However, the Lord Vishnu, as a member of the Hindu Trinity, so their tripartite head being, there are aspects of invisibility in that lore. And so this includes a description of Vishnu having a universal form known as Vishvarupa, beyond the limits of human sense and perception. And in other interpretations, Vishnu is also referred to as Amordaman, or having no form.
See, that's interesting as well, because again, we're going to throw in a little bit of colonial magpieing. We're just going to grab whatever we like that sounds exotic and supernatural othery.
Yeah.
But also, that isn't just like a folklore. That is a belief system. That is a religion. So in some way, by bringing that into this conversation, this situation, Giles is somehow acknowledging that other religions might be just as accurate as Christianity.
Yeah, even though it's a throwaway and it's just a book we see fleetingly. So Giles has, been referring to other religions trying to explain this, and he has the aha moment, and he goes, "It's not spiritual, it's physical." And they all look at him. All the Scoobies are kind of like, "What is the difference? What are you talking about?" And he's like, "It's the quantum mechanical physics." And he pulls out a physics book. And he says, "Reality is shaped, even created, by our perception of reality." So going back briefly to the Cordelia response to the Shylock question, Cordelia has this really unique reading of that scene because she goes, "Well, for Shylock, it's all about me, me, me. What about the other side?" She was like, "One time I hit a girl in my car and it was all about her and her like. But what about me? That was the most traumatic experience of my life." And the teacher, Miss Miller, is like, "That's a unique way to see things. That's a unique perspective. That's a unique perception of reality." And so, yeah, Marcy's perception of herself and the way that people perceive her has caused her to become invisible.
I also love that they use this as a vehicle to show us that Cordelia, not an empty-headed bimbo, because she goes to speak to Mrs. Miller and says, "I've got all these ideas and thoughts. I just don't know what to do with them." And Mrs. Miller says, "Well, come and talk to me and we'll sort it out." Which shows that Cordelia isn't just trying to scrape by with the bare minimum. She's actually going, "I'm thinking about things. How can I think about them most efficiently?" And there's like, I don't know if we've come across it yet, actually, but it's a moment where someone says something to Cordelia and she goes, "Great, now I'm going to be having deep thoughts all day."
I don't know if it's happened yet.
Yeah, I don't, yeah. Something to look forward to.
Also, just briefly back to nightmares, one of Buffy's other nightmares is a test that she didn't know was occurring. And Cordelia is the one that tells her, "You're going to be late for the history test. Yeah. You don't know where the classroom is, do you?" So it's again linking Cordy to knowledge and to education. Yeah. And again, just a quick side note, because it's history class. The textbook is American Odyssey. So we're in American history, but yet again, don't know what period they're in because I forgot to mention last week they were studying the Monroe Doctrine, which predates the Civil War. But Buffy and Willow and Angel were studying for Reconstruction, which is post-Civil War.
So the curriculum's a mess, is what you're telling me.
Basically. So it's just funny, this commentary on, time and history and its significance, and then the show is just absolute fucking chaos when it comes to what historical curriculum is in high school.
That's amazing.
Another way that history manifests itself in this episode that is actually medieval and I think quite interesting. It's a very small throwaway thing, but when Angel surprises Giles in the library, so this seems actually important for quite a few reasons. But first, I'll talk about a kind of more the throwaway before we get into the philosophical. Giles is trying to figure out not only why Marcy is invisible, but also just things they start talking about Slayer lore and the Slayer, because Angel goes, "Something big is brewing." Again, that's what he does.
He just pops up and goes, "Significant things," and then leaves, looks handsome and is a
like a Greek chorus / Cassandra, but they're actually listening to him. Giles goes, "Oh, well, the Tiberius manuscript or something." And then he says, "And the Pergamum Codex, but that was lost in the 15th century." So 2 things. 1, Pergamum, also known as Pergamon, is where none other than Galen, the father of medicine, was born. So Galen, if people do not recall, he was a Greek philosopher, natural philosopher. He is one of the people that really established the idea of the 4 humors in the body: blood, bile, black bile, and phlegm for millennia, all the way up until perhaps the late 18th, early 19th century. This idea of bodily balance and bloodletting as a cure were practiced in medicine. And so he's a name that will keep coming up. And so I don't know if they only chose this space because it is quite important in Greek history just as a whole. But for me, it's exciting. But then it's lost in the 15th century. So again, the Middle Ages is being said as this long, faraway time where things were lost and it's dark and it's mysterious. And then Angel goes, "Oh, I can get you the Pergamum Codex." Yeah. So then we have this figure that lives kind of outside of time because he's arguably an eternal being, right? The living undead. So he's able to track or knows where to find a thing that was lost in history, which is just quite interesting.
It was really fun. Like, I don't know if you ever read the novels that go alongside Buffy, like those tiny teenage novels. I did, obviously. And that was usually one of Angel's roles in those books, is that he'd have a little romantic moment with Buffy, and then Giles would be like, I need this MacGuffin to defeat this creature. And Angel would go, I've got connections because I'm so old. I'll go. And he'll sod off to Europe, find something, and then bring it back. And then everyone will save the day. But he just kind of disappears. And occasionally, like, he and Buffy will be going, like, there's one where they go to the docks and they have to kind of talk to the boatmaster. Shipmaster. I don't know. I don't do the sea. I'm not a sea scientist. They have to talk to whoever's in charge, who's come from France. And Buffy's like, oh, and can't. And then Angel just floods into perfect French. And Buffy's like, oh my God. And it's one of those moments where she's like, I forget you've been around so long, and that you know so much, and you've had a chance to pick up all these things. And so I felt like that moment in Out of Mind, where Angel and Giles are having this chat amongst the bookcases about, as equals,
yes,
about where these books are from, when they happened, how it'll be useful, what they're facing. They also have a conversation about Angel's reflection in one of the bookcases, which we'll get to in a moment. And it just, me as a grown-up, watching that as a kid, I was like, of course, Angel's a vampire. He's lived a lot. Cool. And then that was it. I kind of put it away. Whereas now I'm like, no, he and Giles should have been like the primary relationship, really, because they're both the adults, and the romance with the kid is really strange and odd. And yeah, I wish that they could have done a little bit more with that, about how Angel could have been both a friend and a resource to Giles in the Scooby Gang, because where Giles has had to study to get his information, and we talked about that last week where he said you weren't here from midnight until 6 researching this.
Mm-hmm.
Angel's lived it all, like so much of it, and that's how he's acquired the knowledge. I think that dynamic they could have done more with.
I completely agree. Also, Angel, I don't think has to sleep. They just sleep because they like to. I think that's addressed in a later season. So just as a resource in that regard, too. Angel does become a little bit more involved, if I recall correctly. And that's not necessarily a spoiler because we have other seasons. So this scene, it's such a kind of, there's so much else going on in the episode in regards to an invisible girl that is becoming increasingly homicidal and sociopathic. But this scene between Giles and Angel, I mean, this is when Giles says, like, oh, a vampire in love with a slayer. That's rather poetic in a maudlin sort of way. Right, so we have just some really great bits, but as Alex has said, Angel startles Giles in the library because he has no reflection. And Giles goes, vampire, no reflection. But let's just pause and think about that very quickly, because we know that Angel is an ensouled vampire. So he has the demonic soul, right, that creates him as a vampire, but then he has a human soul.
Theoretically, his own soul returned to him as well.
So, according to vampire lore, a vampire casts no reflection because there's the absence of a human soul. Usually it just says no soul, but as we've discussed in previous episodes, Buffy does play with the term soul, so we're going to say that the demonic soul casts no reflection in this. And it's leaning into, once again, the idea of, self, non-self, personality. But because Angel has a human soul, there is a self to be reflected. So maybe not a full reflection, but he should have some sort of apparitional appearance, wouldn't you think?
I'd say so. I mean, and this goes beyond vampire lore as well. I mean, you can look up Sir James Frazer, The Golden Bough. That was a book that was written in the late Victorian era, and it's one of the earliest works of anthropology.
Yes.
And the idea is that it's quite a leveling book. It looks at different belief systems around the whole world and draws the conclusion, look, we're all the same. It's Victorian, it's colonial, it's still a bit problematic. But
it opens this field of thought before. It shows that anthropology at that time wasn't all about othering. It was just colonial attempts to understand the other. So that was problematic.
Yeah, exactly. It's a nuance that's worth paying attention to, but it's still... Yeah. And the reason why I point this out is because, and this is a completely aside, but The Golden Bough its treatment of magic and witchcraft is often used for 20th century constructions of religious witchcraft. So Wicca relies quite heavily on the Golden Bough, but the Golden Bough doesn't necessarily have the most rigorous structure and the most accurate representation of these other cultures. So to be honest, that might be worth discussing in future episodes when witchcraft becomes more prevalent in Buffy. So we'll put a pin in that for now.
Yeah, and perhaps like a bite size where we just kind of discuss outside a bit more focused on the Golden Bough and religions, because it also introduced the difference of, sympathetic magic and other types of magic that.
Yeah. And also it feeds into like folk horror as well, because the Wicca Man deliberately constructed its theology around the Golden Bough to show that it's part of this older religion. But it's a completely different conversation. I'm segueing.
But it's funny because in Out of Mind, part of the story, the reason why Cordelia is at the epicenter of Marcy's attacks is because she's going to be the May Queen.
Yeah.
What we're going to think about is like Midsummer, right? So this pagan celebration. And Cordelia's dress actually for the May Queen is quite folk, medieval, renaissance-y in appearance. It's that weird late 90s, early 2000s. And this will continue where peasant blouses were really popular.
Yeah.
But it looks much more kind of Cinderella princessy, so that bizarre medievalism-esque fantastic style rather than, I don't know, like what Buffy wears, like the more very secular or not that. Yeah. I don't know how else to explain it.
I honestly, watching this and seeing Cordelia in that dress, I thought that makes no sense. I don't think Cordelia would wear that. That's far too romantic a piece for Cordelia. She would want to be on the cutting edge chic. She'd have done something a little bit different. Different was possible. So the dress, dear listeners and viewers who aren't familiar, it is a square-necked, sleeveless bodice with then like an A-line skirt coming away from it in kind of peachy, orangey, pinky coral colors. What I love about it is it has this very romantic silhouette. You've got a kind of Renaissance bodice, but because it's like corseted into a full skirt, it's a bit Victorian, but peak 90s fabrics. So you have this kind of organza chiffon that's two-tone in the skirt. I was obsessed with that fabric. I draped my bedroom in it. I still have a bag full of it under my bed upstairs. So yeah, it's just this really weird romanticization of Cordelia and her girl gang, which I don't feel quite fits her character, but it does fit the episode. To backpedal slightly,
yes,
we've gone a little bit away from my original point, and that's my bad because I got excited about clothes. The Golden Bough and souls. So the Golden Bough shows how the idea of the soul and reflections are intrinsic, because the Golden Bough instigates or comments on the superstition of covering mirrors when someone dies so that their soul doesn't get trapped or confused by their reflection. And that was happening even in the Victorian era in which the Golden Bough was being written. So you're right, Angel should have some form of reflection because he has a soul. How I was thinking about it, like I was wondering if maybe the demon soul is what reanimates the body. So his physical flesh is in some way infused with demon soul, and the reinstated human soul is on the inside, maybe in the heart or the blood you've discussed in previous episodes, which is of course contained by the flesh. So maybe the demon soul is in some way acting as like a blockage between Angel's soul and his potential reflection.
That could possibly work. It's very interesting and maybe something we need to think about as we continue throughout the series. But no, for now, that would be a good explanation that, it's this kind of shield, this kind of veil.
Yeah, because it would also show why he's affected by sunlight as well, why sunlight would burn his skin, why the crosses burn, because the demon's in the case. Dear listeners, I have no medieval knowledge of this. This is fan theory to the extreme, backed up by the medieval stuff we've been discussing in these episodes. So please don't take this as, dare I say, gospel truth.
Yeah. But other than that scene, Out of Mind isn't medieval in kind of any other ways, but I did do a cursory search on medieval invisible, and something did come up, and it's actually through medievalists.net, so I'll include the link in the show notes. And it's 2 spells that are from the Middle Ages that turn you invisible. So I'm going to share them And again, I'll post the link because I will just kind of be reading a bit directly from this. So this isn't my actual research. I am Danielle Cebulski, who is the host of the medievalists.net podcast. This is one of her posts. But I thought this would be a fun way to kind of wrap up, and then we'll do our scene stealers and everything and say who we are. So the first method, the first kind of way to become invisible in the Middle Ages, comes from the Key of Solomon, which purports to hold the mysteries of the biblical king Solomon. So the methods in it are presumably meant to be less soul endangering than other spells because it's like biblically connected. And so according to this method, you have the ability to be invisible whenever you'd like. But you have to be organized because it is reliant on time and astrology and the lunar cycle. So if you mess up the first time, you have to wait a year to try it again. And so this is how it reads. Make a small image of yellow wax in the form of a man in the month of January and in the day and hour of Saturn. And at that time write with a needle above the crown of his head and upon its skull. You shall then write upon a small strip of the skin of a frog or a toad which you have killed, magic words and characters. You shall then go and suspend the said figure by one of your hairs from the vault of a cavern at the hour of midnight. And then you waft some incense around and call some spirits to you, asking by the living God that they will make you invisible. And then you will wave the incense around again and onto the figure, and you then bury it in a wooden box until you need to become invisible. And when you do, you simply dig up the box and you say, "Come unto me, and never quit me wherever I shall go." And then once you're finished being invisible, you've done your task of spying or lurking about, whatever it is that you need to do, you just return the box to the same spot when you're done. And then you're visible again. So a few things with that is it's kind of evoking what we saw in Witch a bit with the dolls. It's also very Gollum, a la the Jewish folk belief where you write the words, I think it's breath on their forehead. I'd have to double check.
It's a shame.
So, and then we get like the skin of a frog and a toad, which is very kind of Shakespearean. So I think that one's, it has to do with midnight and you're burying thing in a box. You're kind of burying it alive and hiding it away. I just think that one's very fun and touches on so many things we've discussed and just kind of pop cultural references. So that one's from the Key of Solomon. And then the second method is also time sensitive because, dear viewers and dear listeners, the Middle Ages, medicine, natural philosophy, theology, everything revolved around calendars, around cycles of time, solar calendars, lunar calendars, and then you had the church calendar. So everything is actually time sensitive. And in Buffy, we actually do see that. It's one of the hidden medieval components with the prophecies, right? And the calculation of time. So this one comes from the Munich Handbook or a necromancer's handbook. So it's kind of showing what's in that book versus the one that's biblically related. And with this one, Cebulski wrote, "Fortunately, no corpses are required to render yourself invisible, but you do have to summon demons."
Oh, is that all?
Pardon?
Oh, is that all?
But the first one didn't have a corpse, it was a wax figure. But demons. So the first step is the preparation. So first, under a waxing moon on a Wednesday, in the first hour of the day, having remained chaste for 3 days beforehand, and with cut hair and beard, and dressed in white, in a secret place outside of town, under a clear sky, on level ground, trace a circle with a magnificent sword, writing these demonic names. And then you begin the ritual. So first of all, that was a lot. I just read it and I don't know what I just read because it was too many details.
And I've got to have a magnificent goal.
And then you begin the ritual.
Then you begin.
Yeah, now we begin. So you place the sword to the west on the name you've written, Firiel. Firiel, demon name. And when you have placed it there, the sword, have a vessel in which there is a fire with frankincense, myrrh, and other incense, and with the smoke from these go about the circle, suffumigating it, beginning and ending with the name Firiel. So suffumigating is just walking around with the burning incense, which I love how it's frankincense, myrrh, and then just others. Good luck.
Yeah, whatever you fancy.
And then, even though we're talking about demons, after you sprinkle some holy water and called 4 demons this way, they will arrive eager to serve you. And so then you just ask for an invisibility cloak, which is in all sorts of lore and mythology and folk tales. But beware, when you have said this, one will withdraw, a demon, and within an hour will bring forth a cloak. On the third day, return to that place, the circle, with the cloak, and you will find your white garment, which you will take. But be sure to remember, if on the third day you do not return, or you do not take the garment left there, on the fourth day you will find nothing, but in 7 days you will die. So punctuality is very important.
I love that. That's got like the ring to it. Like in
Yeah.
7 days, you're done.
And so apparently these are excerpts from the book European Magic and Witchcraft, a Reader by Martha Rampton.
I need
So again, we'll have links on to those through our show notes as well as our bookshop affiliate page, etc. But that's, if you want to be invisible, just follow all those steps. Good luck.
Or be so boring everyone around you ignores you. Like, or neglected.
Just love social media.
Yeah, that's it. Just stay home. Ta-da!
So we discussed Crosswatch. Alex, what are your quotes or quotes and scene stealers?
Okay, so my serious quote was going to be, the it's romantic in a maudlin sort of way. But I do have to acknowledge Snyder and the comedy genius of Snyder. So where the first student has been attacked in the locker room and beaten with a baseball bat,
Yes.
Students are congregating outside, and one of them whispers, "Who's dead?" And Snyder turns around and goes, "There are no dead students here." Turns away. This week. And it's such a throwaway this week. And it's so perfectly delivered. It's
Armin Shimmerman, gotta love him.
peak. It's comedy gold, because I think I missed it like as a teen. But watching it now, I was like, that's genius. And then my other quote for Nightmares is another Giles being sassy. And it's where he goes, "Willow, do shut up," and just tells her off for panicking. It was just, I love a bit of sarcasm. What about you? What are your quotes?
In Nightmares, I guess one of the first ones, it's in the first scene where they're talking about in class before Wendell opens the book and spiders pours out. So it's Wendell, Xander, and Willow, they're talking. And Cordelia comes and she's like, "You're in my like." She wants to put makeup on, or she's checking in her makeup mirror. And Willow goes, "Why is she so Evita-like?" about Cordelia. And I was like, that is such a specific reference. Because Evita, Don't Cry for Me, Argentina, which became famous because Madonna was in the film in the 90s, which was around this time.
No. I cannot describe to you how everywhere Madonna as Evita was. Don't Cry for Me, Argentina played on radios. They played it at school discos. It was ubiquitous. So as a 90s artifact, it really is just pinning this episode in time, because I went, haha, when I heard that as well, because I'd missed it when it came out.
I mean, I know the song Don't Cry for Me, Argentina because of the musical group Il Divo, and they do a phenomenal rendition of that song. And then I guess for Out of Mind, my quote is a little quip in the cafeteria where they're trying to figure out, this is after the boy is attacked by the bat. And Giles goes, "I've never heard of someone attacked by a lone baseball bat before." And Xander goes, "Maybe it's a vampire bat." And then they all turn and look at him. They don't laugh.
No.
And Xander goes, "I guess that was, I don't know, like bottom of the trough or something." It's so good. Yes, I'm clapping, listeners, because that is comedy wit perfection.
So good.
Like, I am ashamed that the other Scoobies didn't give that any more kudos. So good.
So good. And the thing is, as he said it and I was watching the episode, it kind of passed me by until the silence, and then it settled in my brain, and all the layers of comedy just kind of shuffled together like a deck of cards settling, and I went, that's brilliant.
And like Nicholas Brennan's delivery of it is just, he's just sitting there eating a sandwich and drinking his soda or whatever. And Giles was all serious. And it's, as you said, it takes a moment for it to land. And then once it does, I chuckle out loud every time, or guffaw, however you want to phrase it. So
that's brilliant.
That was my quote for that. What were your scene stealers, Alex?
Okay, so my scene stealer for Nightmares is quite early on, and I think it's in the classroom just before the Wendell thing happens. And it's Buffy's chunky pink light up rings. Again. No! We're like this.
Walking in the hallway, and they're just blinking and huge, and they're like that rubbery material.
They, again, like, I'd forgotten they existed until I watched this episode. And then it was like my entire nervous system remembered the tactile nature of those rings. Blinking rings! Because, of course, I had some. I think one of mine was star-shaped and was kind of like this aqua turquoise color. They looked great. They had those little flippy switches so that you could turn them on and off. They made your fingers stink. You have to scrub at the end of the day to get all that off. But they were fantastic. They were such a source of joy. So yeah, that was my scene stealer for the nightmare.
And mine too. But what about out of mind, out of sight? Did you have one?
Oh, yes. So for out of sight, my scene stealer is where Buffy and Cordelia are both tied to those thrones. And they're trying to reason with the invisible antagonist. And Cordelia's hands, she's struggling. And you can see the hand furthest away from the camera comes completely loose of the ropes and she slaps it back down. And then Buffy has to run over and be pretending to untie her. And I'm like, she's out, babe. You're free. Like, there's no issue here. And it kind of steals the scene because I can't think about anything else except the fact that you could leave right now.
Yeah, I mean, well... We'll see that quite a bit throughout Buffy when people are like tied down or in shackles, chains. They can clearly slip their wrists through, so they're like holding on to them in a way to make it look like they can't get out, and those always tickle me. Well, my scene stealers. So I kind of have two. So one is, it's not a scene stealer, but I think it's something worth acknowledging, and it definitely actually kind of also ties back into Nightmares, but it's from Out of Mind, is when Buffy opens her locker. Because she opens her locker in Nightmares, but you don't see this entirely until Out of Mind, Out of Sight. She opens her locker, it's full of like a picture from Vogue or something, of shoes and all that. But she has a cutout of Michelangelo's David, but he's, rather than being nude, he's wearing like green swim trunks to cover up the nudity. Just kind of like Xander's fear, right, of being naked in the classroom, but he has to be in underwear, but because it's after school special television. So I think that's quite funny because just in their lockers, I mean, Willow has Nerf Herder in hers that's in a Star Wars font, but apparently Allison Hannigan was actually the one that got Joss Whedon, the staff, into Nerf Herder to be the theme song for the series. So I think that's like a nod to her actually being a genuine fan.
I love that. Did you also notice, like, one of the things, like, my next, like, scene stealer would be the fact that she has a photo of her and Giles in her locker?
Willow or Buffy?
Below the Nerf herder is just a photograph, like, it's a horizontal, it's a landscape photograph of her and Giles, and it's had the flash on against a dark background in the library, so they're both bleached out and stood really awkwardly smiling at the camera. And it just looks like Willow's forced him to have like a photo, yay! And then she's pinned it in her locker.
I don't know if I noticed the photo, but I don't think I clocked that it was Willow and Giles.
Willow and Giles just stood really awkwardly.
And then a shout out, an honorary scene stealer, I would say, is the weird top that Buffy's wearing in the second portion of Out of Mind, Out of Sight. It's the baby blue because she looks fantastic in baby blue. She wears it a lot. And so it's got, again, kind of like a priest collar and a V-neck. And then it goes into a silhouette that, again, is kind of that Mandarin priestly outline. But then it's cut with a slit up the middle.
Yeah, it's not quite a crop top, but it's the midriff.
Yeah, and I was like, it's funky. But I actually quite like it because you can have a little bit of those two worlds of the crop top, but then you're covered. And it just looks so good on Sarah Michelle Gellar. So I just wanted to give that one like a tip of the hat.
Totally fair. I enjoyed that top as well. I thought it's the kind of thing that you wear to school. Like, we had own clothes days, and you'd always try and push the envelope so that she absolutely could put that on. And when a teacher's around, she just holds the hem together.
Exactly.
And when a teacher leaves, she lets it go and she's got a crop top. Yep.
Any final thoughts, Alex?
No, we've covered everything I want to do. What about you? Is there anything we haven't touched on?
This is just an earworm for people to think about and for us to think about for next episode. We've gone on and on about Buffy not wearing her cross. Why don't all the Scoobies wear crosses?
I don't. Like, the choices they make baffle me constantly.
So,
I mean, I was so excited, like, in the anxiety dream at the start of Nightmares. That is the most tactically sound outfit she has ever worn. And it's still leather trousers and a glittery top, but at least her hair is tied back and they're in dark colours. And I'm like, at last, she might survive.
Yeah. So just common sense, Buffy logic yet again, being Buffy logic. But Alex, where can people find you?
People can find me on Instagram under Decadence and Dark Ages. I also have literatureunlocked.org is my website. You can also find Literature Unlocked on Ticket Source as a shop for my online events. I run creative writing workshops, writer support groups. I do online lectures. And I'm doing a book club at the end of the month called Only Fangs, where we're reading Interview with the Vampire. So that should be a lot of fun. I'll be doing a little lecture on that. And that's it, really, for me. I'm terrible at the rest of social media. But what about you? Where can folks find you?
So you can find me on Instagram and other social media platforms under the name morbid.may, and May is spelled M-A-E. You can also find both our social media information on our website for this podcast, which is damesmacabre.com. You'll also find links to our YouTube channel and our email there, as well as links to our bookshop affiliation page, where you can find any of the books that we talk about in this series, as long as they're available online, not some rare thing. We'd also like to say thank you to Black Coffee Worship, once again, for their sponsorship, collaboration, what have you, with us, and their discount code that they have given us, which is DamesMac10, and that is DAMESMAC10. And if you use that code when checking out online, you'll get 10% off.
Hooray! And it is.
Woo, do it!
Coffee.
Caffeinate yourself.
Do
Keep
it.
the chaos.
I mean, I've had to, because I have blitzed through, because it's so good, I've blitzed through my resources. I've gone back to my usual coffee and I'm bitter about it because now I know how subpar it is and I wish I hadn't known. So now, very clever, Black Coffee Worship. Thank you so much. I'm now locked in. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. And yeah, I think that's it. Until next time, I'm Meaghan.
I'm Alex.
And this has been
Dames Macabre.
Ooh.